verses, Satan has now come to indwell Judas Iscariot in order to conquer Jesus. But Jesus is bowing to the will of his Father in order to conquer the serpent himself. And so, of course, this leads to a fourth stage. His divine origin and mission, his profound humiliation, his work of salvation, and then, of course, his glorious exaltation. When Jesus has done all this, he takes his clothes again, that wonderful garment that someone had woven for him, and he resumes his place at the head of the table, and he begins to probe his disciples and say to them, now, do you understand what this is all about? Actually, the language that's used here in verse 12, when he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, it's the same language that's used of Jesus' resurrection in John 10, verses 17 to 18. Isn't that interesting? I have power to lay down my life, and I have power to take my life again in the glorious resurrection. And this is what is being symbolized here as Jesus returns to the place of honor. Actually, it's a fulfillment of the ancient prophecy of the suffering servant, isn't it? Remember when I was a child at school learning Isaiah 53, no one told me that passage actually begins in Isaiah 52. The promise of the exaltation of the servant, who when he is exalted because of his suffering, will sprinkle the nations, will bring men and women and young people and boys and girls in a baptism of the forgiveness of sins and the transformation of their lives, and this will reach to the ends of the earth and to the end of the ages. And it's all being symbolized here. If only the disciples could see it. It's being symbolized by Jesus taking his place again. It's paralleled, of course, by what Paul says in Philippians 2, isn't it? That because of his humiliation, his death on the cross, therefore, God has highly exalted him, given him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow and every tongue confess that he is Lord. Fascinating, isn't it, that he bows, kneels before all of his disciples, but with a view to the fact that one day they will joyfully bow before him and crown him Lord of all. And that brings us to the fifth little section here that begins really in verse 12 when Jesus says, do you understand what I have done to you? Do you see the significance of this for my life? But do you also see the significance of this for your life too? Because he's going on to say to them, just as I have washed your feet, if you understand what I have done, then one of the transformations that will inevitably begin to take place in your life is that you will kneel down before your fellow disciples and you will begin to wash their feet too. And so in a sense, there is a moment of glory here revealed to us. Who Jesus is, what Jesus has done for us, how Jesus has been exalted, where Jesus is now. And then there is this application that Jesus is making, to which we'll turn in our second study. So what difference is that actually making to your life now? If Christ became a servant for me, should I not then become a servant of others for him? That's something that characterizes your life